So you have to get me out of here. I didn't know it was legal or illegal, but I just knew it was driving me mad. He said, well, there's nothing we can do, there's nowhere for you to go. So they took me back, after the meeting, they took me back to my room, and he left. I think they knew what they were doing was illegal. So they left the door unlocked. So I opened the door, I walked down, like, how many flights of stairs? 4 flights of stairs. It was right at the top of a mansion, an old mansion. I walked all the way down. In fact, I walked past some of the staff members. They didn't say anything to me. I walked down, outside and out the gate. And I was on the run. Now, by this time, I was 14 years old. Now, I couldn't go and do what many of our Eastern European, illegal, and some of the brothers, some Muslims do. I couldn't go and wash cars, and hand out leaflets and flyers to do some little job. I was on the run. So, I decided the only way to feed myself was to commit crime. So the crimes I decided to commit, the crime was to break into shops. I didn't like the idea of breaking into someone's house. I'll break into shops and I'll steal the cigarettes, those 200 packet cartons of cigarettes they keep behind the counter, and I'll sell them. Now, to get into the shops, I used a very sophisticated method. I used a junkie's key. Anybody here knows what a junkie's key is? Anyone? Huh? It's a brick. Junkie's key. You know junkies? Drug addicts, man. What do they just throw a brick through the glass, man? They want to get in there. We call it a junkie's key. Yeah. Just use a junkie's key, man. Pick a brick up. So I remember the first time I did it, and I smashed the shop window. It was so loud. I was scared. I ran away myself. I was supposed to smash it and jump. Ah! It was so loud. I ran away. But anyway, eventually I became more brave, and I broke into these shops, and I was on the run. Only on the run for 2 weeks. And that began my criminal career. So, I was caught eventually and placed first in an IT centre, and that's not information technology. It's before IT existed. It's called what is it called? Information. See, I've confused myself now. An IT centre was called intermediate treatment. It was for teenagers. And that's called information technology. I was placed in an IT centre, and then from an IT centre I was taken to a secure unit, and then from a secure unit to a remand home. And from a remand home, I waited. And my social worker came to see me there. And he said, look, okay, I realised that we gave you a badge rep, didn't give you many options, so I'm going to give you an option now. You've got 2 choices. We can extend your care order until you are 21 years old. Meaning, you will remain in these institutions till you're 21. Or, you can go and move into a bedsit, go to college, try and make a life for yourself. Any ideas which one I took? I decided to try and go to college and make a life for myself. So I enrolled in college, a local college, and I used to go to college. Now around the corner from where I lived was one of the guys that was in one of the homes with me. Now he decided college wasn't for him, and he had actually become a criminal. And he sold me a stolen bike. So I wanted to get to college, and this is my first set of wheels. I was 16 years old now. So I wanted to go to college. It's much easier for me riding my bike to and from college. I knew it was stolen, but so what? No problem. I came out of my class one day to find that my stolen bike had been stolen. I was furious. How dare they steal my stolen bike? My stolen bike's been stolen. So I went to the head teacher to complain about my stolen bike being stolen, and I burst into his office. And I'll be honest with you, to be honest, I'll be very straight with you. The reason I burst into his office, I grabbed hold of him, I shook him. The reason I overreacted was because college wasn't for me. I left school when I was 14 years old. That was the end of my formal education. And it wasn't working out. And I knew I wasn't going to survive at college. This was kind of my way of copping out by overreacting, and I got expelled. Now I did what many young African Caribbean males did in the 80s. See, unlike now, where you've got a few black faces around here at university, in the 80s, I'll be honest with you, I only knew of one person, one African guy, who wasn't like a friend of mine, I'd only ever seen one black man at university. That was how it was in the 80s. And African Caribbeans, males, did not go to university in the 80s. Go and look at the statistics for yourself. It was unheard of. In the early 80s, it was unheard of for an African Caribbean male to make it to university. Just unheard of. So, I became a career criminal. I decided to turn to crime. In those days, the reason why many young black men became criminals was simply because even if you worked hard and studied hard, you were still not going to get the job. That's how it was. Racism in the 80s was real. It was genuine. You were not, no matter how hard you worked and studied, you were not going to get the job. This is why America, they brought in affirmative action, and the UK brought in these diversity quotas, which are quite good now. You don't have to be very clever at all. But most of these big companies have got to have some blacks. It's good, it's all good. But in those days, that's how it was. And I became involved in a number of criminal type of ventures. Drug dealing, prostitution. Brothers are looking at me. No, I didn't sell my body. I won't make any money, I'd be skinned. I was involved in helping those women involved in prostitution to protect themselves, without going into too much detail. But my main sort of area that I ticked over with was drug dealing. And one day, during what we call the famine. See, a famine, if I said what's a famine to you guys, you say it's when you've got no food or no drink. Like in Ethiopia, you see a famine. Well, in the ghetto, a famine was when you couldn't find any weed. No hash, no drugs around. We used to call it a famine. And during this particular famine, I had to go to a particular dealer. Now this dealer, he was known to be a snitch. That was the rumour about him. He was a snitch. And nobody liked to do business. But he was the only person that was holding in that time. And I wanted to go and make some money. So I said, okay, I have to go and buy from him. So I bought my drugs from him. And I went to meet my friend Winston. And we're driving now back to my house to cut it up and put it into bags. On the way, we saw some guys by the side of the road. And I knew them. Not knew them well, but I'd seen them around. So we pulled over, gave them a lift. What we didn't realise is they were actually under surveillance. The police were watching them. They'd committed an armed robbery. Not just them. Commit an armed robbery and hope somebody's going to drive by and give you a lift. They committed it a few weeks before, and the police were watching them before they pounced. And the movies, when the police are watching the baddies, and they're driving, and sometimes the police, what happens? They lose sight of them. They turn left and turn right, and the police lose them, yeah? And this happened to us. So the police were following us, following these baddies, these armed robbers, and they lost sight of us, lost sight of our car. And they lost sight of us at the exact moment that we pulled over by the side of the road and let them out. And they caught sight of us again when these guys are no longer in the car. So now instead of following them, they're following us. And boom! 5-0. Siren came on, pull over. Now, sometimes a criminal, when you're caught in the midst of a crime, you find yourself in a situation whereby you've actually got options. You don't always get caught what we call bang to rights. Being caught bang to rights is when you're caught and there's nothing you can do. Sometimes you're caught and there's a little window of opportunity. You can do this or do that. So myself and Winston, we looked at one another and said, okay, look, all right, we've been caught, but we've not been caught. They're in a car behind us. What do you want to do? Now we could either come out of our hands up and take whatever prison time you would get being caught in possession of drugs. Now in those days, it's not like Class B or personal or that kind of new terms they'd got for, we weren't holding Class A drugs, it was hash. But in those days, in the 80s, there was very little difference between hash and cocaine. Drugs were drugs. Now there's a big difference. In those days there wasn't. And also, the amount I had was too much for it to be just deemed to be personal, even though there was no such thing as personal in those days either. I was like carrying 3 ounces, which was quite a lot. So there's no way I was getting away with it. So, how much time would I get for this? And what would happen if I could get away? Just run away. So we said, look, we didn't like the police, we didn't love them. So I had a bat in the back of the car, and we got out of the car and run up to the police, and I punched one, he went down, Winston started fighting with another one.